Hey guys, welcome to Rough Riders. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoy this video. Today we're going to be doing an install on a Rugged Radio 6100 intercom system. So for those of you guys that have been following my channel know that back on Black Friday I went and got a deal on the Rugged Radio. So we're going to be doing the install on that. And you know, if you've been following along, you know that last weekend I created the wiring harness for it. That's going to make our job go a lot easier on the installation process. It'll also leave me set up to install a radio later. So you know, we're gonna walk through that process and get this installation done. And do stay tuned because you know, if you've been following along, you know that I'm going to be giving away my old helmet-to-helmet intercom system. This is a great little system. I do have a review on it on the channel, so go check that out. But at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you how you can enter to win this intercom system, and I'll be sending this off to one of you guys. So I'm going to be installing the intercom in the cubby there, and I'm going to actually recess it because I'm going to show you at the end of the video when I've got it recessed back in there. I've got a tablet, an 8-inch tablet that I'm going to be mounting in front of the cubby for my offline GPS. Now, I did get a little ahead of myself before I started recording the video, and I've already started pulling some of this stuff apart, but I did set it back together just real quick so you can see the steps you need to go through to install a radio. So the first thing I did was pulled off, you know, this front shroud cover so that I can get in there behind it, and boy, that is messy and dirty. The other thing I had to do was, now if you've got stock seats you probably won't have to go through all this problem, but I had to pull the seat out a little bit so I could get the sidewall out, so I went ahead and removed that. Then there's a couple of bolts up here holding the front dash piece in. So I went ahead and pulled that, and that allowed me to get this thing out. We're going to pull the center console piece out. Got it in the way of the seat here, but and then this piece now can lift out. Then I pulled all the pins, plastic pins holding the sidewall in and stuff like that, so I can get this piece out. I'm going to mount the switch for the radio right here in place of the helmet icon or the seatbelt icon, and so I went ahead and pulled that out as well. Kind of trying to do all this with one hand, but that basically comes out like this, and I've already unplugged the wiring here. And I've disconnected the wiring on the switch, but that's basically a little plug right here, so that's really easy. So so you know, I've already got this mostly apart to be able to do the install. There's a couple wires holding this on. I need to disconnect those next, but you know, that's just as far as I've got. What I'm going to end up doing is the battery sits right back here. I pulled that out so that when I built the wiring harness I could test everything, so I need to put all that back in. But I'm going to have the cabling run from the battery up along the tunnel, up through here, wrap around there, and then I'm going to end up putting a hole right here in the side of the cubby and feed the cables through. So the relay is going to sit right about here. I'm probably going to, you know, I'll figure out how to tie it off. I'll probably wrap it around this post or this bar right here, and then we'll just feed it straight into the side. So that's how we're going to end up routing the cables. But let's start that process. Because I made my harness in pieces or modules essentially, I've got the relay part. I've got a separate cable run for the power to the radio, and then another wire set for the harness, and they all tie together but I made it so that I could unclip and clip things together to make it a little bit easier on the install, but also so I could actually remove the radio and stuff when I'm parked in a hotel or something like that, or if I'm going to wash the car, I want to be able to remove the radio so it's not damaged by water. So I made this sort of modular to make all that a little bit easier. So we're going to start with just the relay harness first. We've got the power that goes to the battery in the back, and then we're going to feed it up through the tunnel, up into the front, and then into the sides. So let's start by feeding that through. And then I'll figure out how I'm going to tie it off here in a moment. Now, when I built the harness, I followed the lengths that was being used by Rugged Radio on their little wire diagram, and I'm finding out that, you know, I made this thing, you know, way too long. They specified like 90 inches. You know, that's if you're probably doing a 4-seater kind of install or something, because I actually ran it less. I ran it to about 75, 80 inches, something like that. And I'm seeing that that's already way too long for this. It's not going to be a problem. You know, I'll just have to tie off all the excess somewhere. But, you know, if I'm doing it again, I would actually make it quite a bit shorter. I'd probably make it probably no more than 6 feet. You know, 72 inches, and even then that's probably going to be a little long. So, but that'll give you a little bit of extra room in case you're dealing with extra wire. So, so we got the wire running through the cab, through the tunnel. There's a wire block here. I'll show you this, a little sponge thing here that I can feed the wires through. I'll show you that just a close up here in a second. I then came through. I'll zip tie it off to these rails, or maybe to these other wires that are right here, to keep that from pulling on the battery or anything like that during the, you know, frame torquing and stuff like that. Now let's go look at the front and see what we have to do with the excess wire and where we can tie it all off at. Okay, so you can see where the wire's fed up and come up through here, and, you know, I have quite a bit of excess wire here to deal with. So I've got to figure out where to run that, and so what I'm thinking is probably wrap it around this bar a handful of times. All of them through. You got the radiator right here, and so you got a lot of heat blowing this way, so I don't want to introduce any additional heat to this. So I think the bar over here is a little bit more out of the way. So what I've done is I fed the cable through here, through this little sponge-like wall, and then I've zip tied it right here along this tube, and then again zip tied it here, and then one more time up here, so that way it's not going to shift and move around or anything like that, and then it's routed up in through the wall. Okay, so you can see here where the helmet and seatbelt alarm lights were, and so we popped that out, but because it was too narrow for the switch, we had to take a box cutter and shave off just a little bit on each side, and then take a nail file to clean up the edges so that the switch can sit in there, and then it just pops right in nice and snug, just like that. And so that's how we're mounting the switch. Okay, so I've got everything wired in. I've got all my terminals tightened down. I put a slit in the boot so that way it can still cover the terminal. I've tucked my fuse holders back underneath and behind the battery, so that's all done. So now I've got nice clean wiring all the way through. I've got my switch wired up and installed. I can enable it and turn it on. So that's in there nice and clean. So now I've got to run the wires for the headset. So I'm going to run those right now, and then we'll be able to start putting all this back together, and then the last piece is going to be install the radio and cut the hole in the cubby. So let's run these wires. Okay, so basically what we got going on here is I've got my push to talk button coming up for the passenger side coming up through the tunnel. I did loop it around the bar here to get rid of the excess. I've got the power line, the white one, coming up. That's loosely wrapped around this bar as well. Generally, you don't coil electrical wire and have a circuit run through it, because there's essentially two things that happen. One is you create an electromagnetic field when you have a copper wire and you run electricity through it that's been coiled. In this particular case, there's only going to be running at most, I mean right now there's only going to be running about half an amp, a little less than 1 amp. And then when I add a radio, even if I added a 60-watt radio, at most I'd have about 7 amps running through that. And there's only 3 wraps here, so it's not a big deal. It's not going to create a big electrical field no matter what anyway, magnetic field. So that's not a big deal to begin with. The second thing is that it generates heat when you do that. So because an electrical wire does have resistance, you are going to have a voltage drop, and then you're also going to have heat generated from that. And so again, because at most it's 7 amps and there's only 3 wraps on this wire, it's not a huge deal, but I've got them spread out anyway, loosely spread out, so that way you're not going to have a concentration of heat there. So we should be good there. For the headset wires then, I've got those running through the tunnel as well. So I had the power wire come up on the right side of the tunnel, and so I routed the headset wires coming up on the left side of the tunnel, so they come out through this side over here, just to separate them. I don't think it's a big deal in this particular case. I don't think I'd get any noise or any crosstalk or anything like that from that. So you could probably run them down the same side. I don't think it would be a big deal. I think everything would work just fine. But you know, I went ahead and did it anyway because I was there. It was easy enough to do, to separate the essentially what you've got is basically speaker wire running from the headsets to the radio or to the intercom. Now, when I go to install a radio, I'm going to have an antenna wire, and that I will definitely not want to run down the center tunnel, because now you're dealing with a fairly substantial RF field, and you do not want that next to your power or intercom line. So that I'll probably end up running down through the side of the car. But that's what's going on up front. You can see I've got my relay block just sort of zip tight here. The other thing is, notice everything's kind of loose, right? I didn't tighten any of these things down too much, these zip ties, because you don't want them causing any sort of fraying of the lines and stuff. You want them loose. You want the wires loose enough that, as the frame twists and torques and stuff, you don't get abrasion or anything like that going on. So they're loose enough that they've got essentially strain relief. They've got room to bend and flex and all that kind of stuff without damaging the line. I've got them fairly well protected. I don't have them on any sharp turns or sharp corners or anything like that that's going to cause them to fray or damage the line and short it out. So be careful of all that as you're doing your install and routing your wires. Okay, so now we're going to mount the push to talk button, and so I want it right at the edge where this starts to fold over. So I've got the washer from the push to talk button, and what we've done is we've kind of marked our what's center between these 2 points, and then come down as far as we possibly can, and then we kind of push that right at the edge and use the washer to mark our hole. So we've got that, and so now I'm going to just drill that hole out. Okay, so there's the completed hole. We didn't have a drill bit big enough for it, so we had to just kind of open it up a little at a time and just sneak up on it, so that way we didn't make it too big or anything, and so now it just barely fits. So the push talk button uses 2 washers. One goes on the top, then this one goes on the bottom and kind of sandwiches the plastic, and then you've got 2 nuts to tighten it down and secure it into place. And there's the button installed. See, it's got the 2 nuts on the back side all tightened up. So let's go put this back together. So for the push to talk button cabling, I'm coming through this little hole right here up through the transmission tunnel behind the cubby, and then there is a little gap right there. I'm going to coil up a little extra wire right there so that if I ever have to remove this, I've got a little bit of wire to work with, but I'll obviously have to disconnect everything from the radio in order to pull this whole center console off. For the other push to talk button, I'm doing the same thing. So I'm mounting it up on the center bar and then routing that cable right in through there. Okay, so the inside is done. All the cables are routed. I've got all the buttons installed, all that kind of stuff. So next I've got to just mount the radio and connect up all the connectors, and I should be good to go. So next we're going to install the headsets into the helmets, and so I've already pulled all the liners out so we can run the cabling and all that kind of stuff. And you can see my helmet already has cutouts for the earpieces, so all of that is set. To hold the boom in place, we've created a little Velcro thing. The Rugged Radio guys say to run basically a bead of glue to hold the boom for the mic in place. I didn't want to do that, so we just got some sticky Velcro and created a little piece to hold that we're going to just tack into the side to hold the boom mic into place. So now we're going to put the little Velcro thing in that we made. So what I've done is I've drilled a hole right here in the side of the cubby to feed the wires through, as opposed to drilling them in the back. And the reason why I did that was because as water comes, if I go through a puddle and water splashes up, it would get into the cubby easier if there were holes in the back. This way the water has to go in, and then it's got to make a right turn and follow the wires in. So, and the hole's just big enough for all the wires, so that should help prevent any sort of water leaking into the compartment. So to mount the radio in the cubby, we picked up some of this 3M locking kind of like Velcro sort of material, and so it's adhesive on one side, so we're gonna put it on the bottom side of the intercom, and then these just kind of lock together and become a really tight bond, so that'll hold the radio in place, or the intercom in place. And then for the faceplate, we picked up some black polycarbonate acrylic type material, and we've marked out the size of the faceplate, so we're going to go route that out, and then we'll use the same adhesive strips to attach the faceplate to the cubby. And here's the cutout done. Not perfect. We made a couple of little mistakes, but for the first pass I think it came out pretty good. So we may end up making another one at some point later on down the road, but I think for now this is going to work out pretty well. So here's the final install. You can see I've got my power switch here. Works, powers the radio up as expected. The push to talk button I've got right here for the driver's side, and then up here on the bar for the passenger side. Got the faceplate on with the Duralock, and by the way, that Duralock stuff is insanely strong. I actually had to use a screwdriver to pry it in here and to be able to get the faceplate off. So I'm not worried about the radio or anything bouncing around, because that stuff is not going to break loose. Not entirely happy with the faceplate. Some of the edges didn't come out as clean as I would have liked, and being shiny plexiglass, it's going to be probably going to be hard to keep clean, especially being black. But you know, it is what it is. I'll probably make another one at some point and probably use a different material, but you know, not bad for some last minute changes of plans. I think one thing I would do differently is I would have mounted the push to talk for the driver's side right here on the face plate instead of in the plastic. But at the time I was mounting this, I was still thinking I was going to use my tablet right here for my GPS. So but not bad. So there you go, that's the install process. Okay, so that's pretty much all there is to doing the install. Creating the wire harness up front really saved a lot of time and made the job really easy. Really pleased with the install. I think everything came together pretty good. The hardest part, I think, was having to create that faceplate at the last minute because that wasn't part of the original plan. I was originally going to put a 8-inch Android tablet there for my offline GPS. I was going to recess the radio further back in the cubby, but I forgot to account for those connectors on the end, so that ended up pushing the radio a little bit further forward, and therefore I couldn't mount my tablet there. So I'll have to do something different for that. I've got some ideas on how I'm going to solve that problem and where I'm going to put it. So you know, I'll shoot a video on that when I figure that one out. But overall, pretty pleased with the installation. So let's talk about how to win the intercom. So as I said, I'm giving this away to one of you guys, and here's what you need to do to enter to win. First off, subscribe to the channel. Second, give the video a thumbs up, and third, leave a comment. You know, do those things, and then I will pick a winner at random using a random generator to give this away to somebody. I will continue accepting comments and all that kind of stuff on the channel, on the video, until the end of January. And then at that point I will do a drawing and announce a winner. So that's all you got to do. You know, and I'd certainly appreciate it if you tag a friend when you leave your comment. That helps me build my channel. But you know, best of luck to all you guys. Happy holidays, and thanks for watching. If you got any questions, comments, please leave it below. If you've got any tips, you know, or critiques of my install, certainly leave that below as well. I do try and answer every single comment that you guys leave. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time, and good luck.